Hello, I'm Robert Yule, and this is the 16th in my series on Genesis 1:26, being a good steward of God's kingdom. Today, I'm going to discuss global warming, or maybe I'm going to be talking about the next global ice age. Which is it? Well, let's talk about that. So, global warming can either be natural or it can be caused by human activity. In the natural, we have the problem that the sun, as it goes through its normal life cycle, is releasing more and more light or energy. Its luminosity is increasing. And the fact that the Earth's temperature has remained constant during the life cycle of the sun is amazing. And it's called the faint sun paradox, kind of an unusual name. What's happening? As the sun has gotten hotter, as you can see on the graph on the right, the Earth's temperature has not been changing. What is that? Why is the sun getting hotter? Well, as it burns, that part that's burning actually is growing. It burns from the inside out. And so the surface area where the fusion is occurring is getting bigger and bigger. It produces more light. And therefore, the amount of light hitting the Earth and its energy is increasing. The sun is about 30% brighter today than it was when the Earth was formed 3.8 billion years ago. But the temperature of the Earth has remained relatively stable. What has been happening is that during that time frame, greenhouse gases that trap heat in the Earth have been decreasing, and the net effect has been the temperature has remained the same. There are several greenhouse gases, ammonia, carbon dioxide, but for practical purposes, it's been the carbon dioxide that has been being reduced year by year over billions of years. And what's the problem? Well, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere has reached the level where if it gets any significantly lower, there's not enough CO2 for plants to live any longer. Plants get all of their carbon to make hydrocarbons from the air. It's from the carbon dioxide. If there's not enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, plants no longer grow. And people have done experiments where they've put in plants in atmospheres with more carbon dioxide, and they love it. They thrive. We're really reaching that critical minimum for carbon dioxide. And so taking more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere to keep the Earth's temperature stable is not an option if we want to continue to have plant life. So what else can we do? What's going to happen to the Earth? I don't know any more than anyone else does. People have been working on this problem, and it's a good problem to work on. That was a great question I just asked. So, what is going to happen as the Earth warms up? Now, that will truly surprise you unless you've already learned this. As the Earth's temperature rises, something happens that gets triggered, and it starts the next ice age. The Earth has had many ice ages, and we can study them in the geological records. They're pretty well understood of what happens that causes an ice age to occur, and I'm going to walk you through that without all the detail of how we know that. Let's start with what's happening with the Earth's temperature, especially the Arctic Ocean. This is the key to understanding the beginning of an ice age. The Arctic Ocean is normally covered in ice. That ice is sitting on seawater, and in seawater, ice melts at minus 2 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees below freezing of fresh water. And if you have freshwater ice sitting on seawater, the salt in the seawater will dissolve that ice and make it melt, much like when you put salt on snow to make it melt. The same exact principle. The salt wants to be in liquid water and it melts the ice to get there. we look at that graph, it's from 1880 to the present day. You can see that the Arctic temperature has gone from an average of about 0 degrees Celsius to about 2 degrees Celsius. That's well above the melting point. Now, this is the average temperature for the Arctic Ocean. The northernmost part of the Arctic Ocean currently is still pretty consistently below -2 degrees centigrade, and the ice at the North Pole in itself is not melting. But even today, large chunks of the Arctic Ocean during the summer are melting, and they anticipate by the end of the century, the Arctic will even be ice-free during the middle of winter. Why is this important? Siberia, Alaska, northern Canada are some of the driest places on Earth in terms of precipitation. The rainfall or snowfall there is well below that of what we consider to be a desert because there's no moisture in the air. Moisture comes from the oceans, and the ocean up in the Arctic is covered with ice, and therefore nothing's happening. When the ice is gone, the primary way that moisture gets in the air is not from heat or evaporation. It is from the wind. The wind is what removes water from the ocean. And there's a lot of wind in the Arctic. And so once it goes ice-free, the Arctic air will become incredibly filled with moisture. And as it gets cold in the winter, that moisture will condense into snow and start to fall. If it falls on the Arctic Ocean, it will melt because the seawater is warm enough to do that. If it falls on top of Siberia or Alaska or Canada, it will stick. And that is the beginning of an ice age. You start to pile up huge amounts of snow on top of these regions. As long as the ocean temperature is warm enough to prevent the Arctic Ocean from being covered in ice, this process will continue. And it will take a long time for this to cause the oceans to cool. So this is going to be happening for hundreds and hundreds of years. Huge amounts of snow will be falling. The lower picture shows coverage of the glacier that formed the last time this happened about 13,000 years ago. The blue area shows you the scope of the major glaciers on the northern hemisphere. This is just looking from the North Pole down. Put that in context, it's the Alps, it's all of England, it's all of Germany, it's all of Russia, it's all of Greenland, all of Iceland, all of Canada, most of Alaska, and a big chunk of northern United States will be covered in a glacier. And that glacier is usually about 1,000 feet thick slab of ice. This is catastrophic to anyone who's trying to live there, to the life that is there. It's a gigantic glacier. How fast will this glacier form? Once the ice age starts, it's about 100 years. And so we could be looking at somewhere between 100 to 200 years from now, where we're trying to deal with, at least our descendants are, this major, major ice formation going on. Something similar is happening in the southern hemisphere, not quite as severe. Yeah, time to move to the equator. As this ice forms, it reflects a lot of heat, and this starts the process of cooling the Earth down. And so eventually the Earth gets cool enough that the Arctic freezes over again and the glacier formation stops. The Earth continues to cool for a while. Glaciers tend to move, they slide down into the ocean, and eventually the Earth will start the cycle of heating back up again. Humankind apparently, if we understand the Bible, there's only one passage that talks about this correctly. During the Ice Age, the water levels drop because all the water is being deposited on top of land. As the earth heats back up again, that water on the land is melting and rolling back into the sea, and the sea level rises. And there's one verse that one of the descendants of Noah, called Peleg, during his lifetime, the land bridge between Asia and North America apparently was no longer passable. The sea level rose too high. That'd be about 13,000 years ago. And that's in the days of Peleg, if you want to go find that verse. So an ice age is survivable. What do we need to do? We need to learn a lot about how to manage this world God has given us so that we can cope with the climate change, which is about to happen. It's going to happen. It's only the when and how severe the impact is that we can influence. All right. Well, next week, I'm probably going to cover my last topic that I'll be covering with you. What I'll be covering is recycling. How successful is that program, and what should we be doing? So until next week, please be a good steward of this world. Bye.